Shalom and welcome to another segment of the Bible study, learning of Nach. We are towards the end of the book of Samuel, or the first book of Samuel. There are two. So we're concluding with the final chapters. David is still on the run. Not only is he still on the run, but he is very fed up. He's very frustrated. He's very desperate. Even though in the previous chapter, Saul realized that he was wrong, but he's like, David's like, we've been in this story before, deja vu, so many times. I know what's going to happen. You know, where you're going to say you missed me, and you're going to say you were wrong, then you're going to go home, and you're going to try to kill me again. How many times can this happen? That's what we're up to in chapter 27. And in the beginning of the chapter, David says just that. He says to himself, one day I'm not going to have so much luck, and Saul is just going to actually end up killing me. I have no choice, he says, but to flee to the land of the Plishtim, and there Saul will not seek me anymore, because I'm going to go to the enemy. And so King Saul, Shaul, is not going to go, obviously, knocking on the enemy's door. You know, the equivalent is, if I'm being chased in my country, I go to Iran. Israel's not going to go running after me in Iran. There are certain enemies, and I'll be safe there. Of course, how would I possibly be safe in Iran? How is David possibly going to be safe in the Plishtim's cities? Well, let's look. In verse 2, David takes his 600 men with him to Achish, the son of Ma'uch, the king of Gath. Now, if we remember several chapters back, David, in fact, went to a man named Achish, the king of Gath, and he acted like a crazy person. And you remember, Achish said famously, Chaser mishugaim ani. I don't need more crazies in my house, so he sent him away. How is it possible that David now goes back to the same Achish and expects that he's not going to be killed? Either he continues to act like a deranged lunatic, or he's going to say, no, I was tricking you. And now he makes a relationship with him. It doesn't make sense. Commentaries try to figure this out. First of all, what happens? Verse 3, David and his men stay with the king of Gath in their homes that the king of Gath gave them. David with his two wives, Achinoam and Abigail. And once, verse 4, when Shaul was told that David ran to Gath, he's realized, okay, I can't chase him anymore. That's the end of the saga of Shaul chasing David. Now, what chutzpah, audacity, brilliance, strategy does it take for David to go to the enemy, the mortal enemy, the sworn enemy of the Jewish people, the Israelites, and he'll be protected there and he'll be safe there? The problem is, of course, number one, why would Achish accept him? Why isn't he just going to kill him off? And number two, on a moral level, David is ready to go and swear allegiance to the enemies. What's he going to do? He's going to pick up and start killing Jews? Very complicated position that he puts himself, and he had no choice. So the commentaries debate. The easiest thing to say is that the Navi goes out of its way to say that Achash was the son of Ma'och. Now, in the previous Achish, Achish, the previous Achish did not have the name the son of Ma'och. Therefore, Rabbi Yosef Ibn Kaspi suggests, okay, it's a different Achish, and therefore it makes perfect sense that he was able to go there. Other commentaries say, come on, Achish, it's the same name, and it hasn't been too long. It's the same Achish. After all, it's the king of Gat. So they make a distinction. They say there's a difference. When David came the first time, he came alone. And then, he somehow survived and managed, and they thought he was crazy, and then he left. Today he's coming back with 600 men. He's not coming alone. He's coming with an army. Now, it's quite possible, after all, everyone has, spies. So isn't it possible that the spies of Gat found out that David is the enemy of King Shaul? And David comes with his army to Achish and says, I swear fealty to you. I will fight for you. I will go and kill Shaul or whomever. Okay, so we understand then, according to this theory, it makes sense that why Achish, David fooled him once, he can fool him a second time. The question is, what about David? Does he go and start killing people? Is he that desperate? Is that the righteous thing to do? So let's see. Meanwhile, he's living in the city center near the king. So in verse 5, David says to Achish, listen, if you find that you're happy with me, give me one of your cities near you, and I and my men will stay there. And Achish gave him a city called Ziklag, and that became part of David's kingdom eventually. Anyway, how long is David there? 1 year and 4 months. Is that it in English? Yeah, 1 year and 4 months. He stays in the enemy territory. Now, what did they do, and how did they convince Achish that they were the sworn enemy of Israelites? The answer is very easy. Go and kill some Israelites. So here's what he did, verse 8. David and his men would go to non-Jewish villages next to Jewish ones, and called the Geshurites or the Amalekites or the Grizites. And he would kill every single last one of them, take their cattle, take their clothing, take their camels, and come back to Achish. And he would say to Achish, we made a raid and we killed an entire city of Israel. Now, this ruse was brilliant because as long as he completely decimated the city and left no one alive, Achish would never know. And he comes back with all this booty, and he, throws some Jewish stars on it or whatever. And the people, Achish is like, oh my God, he's a killer. He is our greatest hero. He's going to go back and kill every last one of the Jews. For example, verse 10, Achish said, hey, where are you going today? And he said, oh, today I killed the Jews of the Negev and the Rachamelites of the Negev and the Canaanites, which were supposed to be Jews. But since he killed them all, the Achish did not know. And as a result, Achish trusted David until to be his sworn servant to go and kill all of the Israelites. So David finds shelter in Gat in the Plishtim, but he doesn't violate his morality. He does not go and actually kill Jews. He does kill other people, other enemies of Jews, and he does so because he needs to do this in order to survive. Chapter 28. Now, this is a very complicated chapter. The reason is, we learn in the first few verses. The Philistines decide to gather their armies together and to fight against Israel. And Achish says to David, you'll come out with me to battle, correct? And David responds, Certainly, you know what your servant will do. And Achish said, therefore, because I trust you so much, you will be my personal royal guard. The implication, I believe, is that that David convinced Achish to keep David back to protect Achish rather than to go and slay Israelites. Anyway, that's the story in the first two verses. Okay. Remember that Samuel is dead, verse 3. It reminds us that Samuel is dead. And it also reminds us, this is like a narration to explain the next part of the story. So the Navi reminds us that Samuel had died, and reminds us that one of the things that Shaul did was kill, as it says in the... I hope I'm still recording. And I don't know what happened, but I'm returning to share screen. It says I'm still recording, so I will continue talking. Okay. Once again, chapter 28, the Philistines are getting ready for a major battle. The Navi tells us that two pieces of information you need to know in order to understand the next part of the story. Number one, Samuel's dead. Number two, Shaul had killed off almost all of the Ovot and Yidonim. Now, this is a verse in the Torah that we'll learn about, that there's something called Ovot and Yidonim, and I'll show you right here. Here's the verses in the Torah. A sorcerer shall not be allowed to live, for you are coming into a land that God is granting you. Do not learn the ways of the abominations of the native people. There shall not be amongst you a sorcerer, a soothsayer, or an engager of witchcraft. That's an Ov and a Yidoni. Or one who calls up the dead. For it's abomination before God, and because of these abominations, God is giving you the land. So that's interesting. In other words, there's something called witches, there's something called sorcerers, and there's something called people who bring up the dead back to life for a moment, or apparitions, okay? Now, the Torah prohibits the use of these things. In fact, tells you have to kill these people because they're so terrible. But it doesn't say because they're lying. It just says that it's not a good thing. It's an abomination to engage in this. So you have to wonder, what exactly is that deal? Okay, what's it about? Well, let's see. Verse 4, the Plishtim gather in a place called Shunem, okay, and Israel gathers in another side of the mountain called Gilboa. Now Shaul is in the Gilboa, and he looks at the entire camp of the Philistines, and he shudders. He realizes there's so many, and it looks like a battle to end all battles, and it's a dangerous situation. So what does Shaul do? Verse 6, which in normal situations sounds like a great thing. He goes and he asks God for help, for a response, what to do. But God does not answer him. Neither in dreams, nor in lights, or in Urim, nor with prophets. In other words, Shaul exhausts every possibility to find out what he should do. Of course, the problem is that Shaul forgot that God said to him he's no longer with him. And therefore, he doesn't understand, even though he's been murdering people all over the place and trying to kill David, the anointed one. Shaul doesn't understand because Shaul is sick. So when Shaul realizes that he's not getting an answer from God, What does he say? Verse 7. Find me the woman which, or the woman who can consult with the ghosts. Find me the Baalat Ov, and I will go and seek her. They found, okay, there's one in Ein Dor, and then, by the way, there's now a phrase called the Witches of Endor. It's because this place was called Ein Dor, and she was the Baalat Ov. Anyway, so Shaul goes there, and he dresses up, and not as a king. He wears different types of clothing. He is incognito. He goes with two men in the middle of the night and says to the lady, conjure me up, and bring me someone whom I say I want to talk to. Verse 9, she said, I don't know what you're talking about. Shaul killed all of the Ovot and Yidonims. So, what are you talking? She's obviously nervous because if anyone finds out that she can, conjure up a spirit, she'll be killed. So verse 10, in an abominable way, Shaul says, in the name of God, nothing will happen to you. So he takes God's name and lies to her, okay? And then is going to engage in finding the spirit of someone. So verse 11, who do you want? And he says, I want Shmuel. So she brings up Shmuel, and as soon as she sees Shmuel coming from the grave, she turns and says, you must be Shaul, you've been lying to me. Because the way the commentaries explain, the way in which she brought up Shmuel came up as if honoring the king, and he would only do it in such a way to honor the king, because it's Shaul. So she realized that. So Shaul wasn't convinced. So he said, what does this man look like? And she says, he's an old man and he's wearing a coat. And Shmuel said, oh, that's him. Shaul said, that's him. And he bows down. And then in verse 15, Shmuel says, why did you anger me by bringing me up from the dead? Now, this is a story that's taking place in the Bible. And we have to figure out how to understand this. The spirit of Shmuel is brought up from the dead. And Shaul responds, the Plishtim are on top of me and they're going to kill me and God isn't answering me and there are no prophets who are helping me. What else can I do? And Shmuel says, well, what are you asking me for? Don't you remember I told you that God is no longer with you? God hates you now. And God split your kingdom, or tore it apart. And he gave it to David. Don't you remember all this? Because you angered me at Amalek. And therefore, now verse 19, Shmuel says, you wake me up. This is what you're going to hear. God is going to give Israel a defeat tomorrow, and you and your sons will be with me, which means that they're going to die. And the whole camp will be given in the hands of the Philistines. Well, Shaul bows down and is very scared. And obviously it affected his soul. He wouldn't even eat bread all night and all day. And the woman comes to him and says, I see you're very frightened and you're very shocked and dismayed. And there's a little discussion here about the end, about eating something. And in the end, he ate something, but that's the end of the chapter. This is very strange. We're not used to, the situation here being that we conjure up spirits. Is this all a hoax? Or did it really happen? The answer, of course, is it's a debate. There's a good article by Rabbi Aaron Lopiansky in Aish.com. He says the following: we can't believe that there are forces outside of God. That's not Judaism. Okay? That's another religion called Zoroastrianism. There's no force outside of God. But at the same time, we can't believe that God is doing these the conjuring these spirits, and what's he doing this for? So he said, listen, God creates the universe, and then he creates something called nature. And nature is the intermediate layer between God and man. So between us and God, there's something called nature. And nature has its own laws and its own causes and effects, and it's a complicated system, and it has beauty, and it has horror, and it has danger, and it has fear, fire, and it has things that we can't explain as well. So it would be nice to say that the whole nature runs independent from God, which is what atheists believe, gravity, inertia, magnetism, all work whether the person's a sinner or a saint. But that's not our belief. But between God and the world of nature, there's another bridge, which we call the occult. In other words, it's somewhere in the middle. It's beyond. We believe in the spirit. We believe in the soul. So, is it too far-reaching to believe that that there's not a possibility of accessing the occult? I believe that the Torah said, don't engage in the occult. But the Torah doesn't say, because there's no such thing as the occult. It's just saying it's a bad idea. It's an abomination. It's a distortion of how you should live your life. There are people who can understand this, but engaging in that is a danger. So I'll leave this, article up for those who want to read more. But that's how we'll conclude right now, and we'll pick up on the battle that takes place, which is a tragic one and one which changes the course of Jewish history. And we'll finish our discussion today right now. Thank you very much, and shalom to all.
Thanks.